On behalf of the organizing committee, first of all, welcome, and we are very sorry. Unfortunately, some events do not depend on us, but we are very happy to see the president in the house, and I would like to start the panel, and I would like to introduce the moderator of the panel. We are very happy to have you again this year. So Bronwen Maddox, Director and Chief Executive at Chatham House. Over to you, Bronwen.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted to be here and with a terrific panel, and I'll come on to them one by one. But let me just say something, particularly as the President is here, sort of out there or upstairs, that he made in his speech yesterday to the big hall in Davos. He made lots of points, but he made some that are particularly relevant to the discussion we're having today, and I thought were very moving. And he said, towards the end of his speech, he said, Europe should not forget just how many people want to join Europe and how much potential it has. And it came after some rather downbeat speeches from European leaders, I'm not naming any, and discussion of European economy and problems and so on. And he said, come on, Europe, you can invest in your own AI, you must invest in your own defense, but come on, you are a great part of the world. And it was one of the best rallying calls at Davos for the continent that Davos is sitting in that I've heard this week, and relevant in a way to the discussion that we're going to have. So we're talking about insurance in Ukraine, and we're really addressing two questions. Why? Why is it needed? And we'll get into some of the detail on that. And then how? What are the opportunities? What are the problems? And I have a terrific panel. I'm going to introduce them one by one as they come to speak. And they're just going to begin with that first question, why? And then we'll come around the how, and then we'll come to your questions. And then we will go a bit over the top of the hour, but people have different commitments. So we will bridge the gap between where we should have stopped and 1 hour. With that, let me welcome Oleksiy Sobolev, who is the first Deputy Minister of the Economy. And you're going to take us away with some first thoughts on what Ukraine needs in the way of insurance at this point to rebuild.
Thank you very much for this question, and yeah, should be working, yes. Thank you for all the panelists to be here. Really appreciate it. Why? Because this is an important topic. What we see that the reconstruction needs for Ukraine are in hundreds of billions. We know that there is not sufficient amount of public money that's going to cover this bill. It just doesn't work. So a lot of the funding is going to come from the private sector. In order for the private sector to come, so for example, we calculated then for us to achieve sustainable growth over the up until the 2030, we need around 100 billion FDI. This FDI will not come without insurance on them. And insurance is very particular thing. I would say, like one example that the Ministry of Economy was involved in doing this insurance, the Unity facility. So basically, how it looked from our side, the government deployed 20 million of budget funding and blocked this on the account to ensure the first loss. And together with Marsh, McLennan, and other insurers, we launched this Unity facility. Not many companies used it, but immediately the rates dropped like several times over to kind of levels that allowed the business to start shipping grain out of Ukraine. So this just shows, and right now the market works well without this facility, and we kind of taking this money to set aside for another insurance products. So this shows how insurance could facilitate the activity that couldn't be done without it, even if no money is spent actually, right? Was just this signs that the government is ready to take first loss. We have enough donor funding, we have enough donor commitment, enough even money set aside in the budget to produce these instruments. But we need to devise these instruments together with the insurance market and together with the private community. So they need to tell us what's needed. Last year, we did a lot of war risk insurance facilities that come in line this year. So back to your question, why is it needed? Because it unlocks different investment that are like orders of magnitude bigger than the expenses of the insurance itself.
Thank you very much. And in my rush to start off, I forgot to say that Marsh McLennan is sponsoring this panel, but has been really involved in trying to tease out these questions on Ukraine's behalf. May I just ask you, out of my own ignorance, but because I think people here would like to be sure of just a bit of the technical detail. First, when you say, look, this will unlock lots of foreign direct investment, in what Ukraine expects, are you looking to government money, which doesn't always need insurance, or are you really looking to the private sector?
No, as I said, like the biggest unknown, we more or less know how much like public money we can receive over the next years, and there are like Russian assets that eventually going to be working in Ukraine. But the biggest unknown, and that's the bigger factor of change, so Ukraine could grow like quicker and be more sustainable and bring the sustainability back to Europe, is the private money, the amount of private money that we can attract. So basically, unfortunately, Ukrainian insurance market is rather shallow. So we need to develop it together to be able to attract more private money with these instruments. However, not all the private transactions require, like for example, war risk insurance. So we had a huge transaction done last year with Xavier Niel investing in Ukraine telecom sector. It was done without war risk insurance. So like every situation is different, but what we see is that the existence of insurance instruments themselves decreases the risks and allows to have other kind of good externalities.
Okay, thank you for that. I was just trying to join it up with other conversations in these halls in Davos saying, oh, China wants to put a lot of money into Ukraine. We might come back to that. And just one technical point. We were having a lively discussion outside while waiting for the president. So Ukraine's shipping at the moment coming out through the Black Sea, is that insured or not?
It is, like, but the market is working without this government first loss guarantee, because the rates are acceptable to all the businesses. So this is exactly what we're looking for, to slightly nudge, you know, and then the market set up themselves and everything's working fine without this.
Thank you. That's got us off to a great start. I wonder if I could come next to Bernie Mensah, President of Bank of America, and if you could tackle for us from your perspective this question of why and what it is that Ukraine and investors need.
Thanks, and thanks for having me. I don't think I could have said it much better than the First Minister in terms of why. I would add by saying that it's part of the core of what financial services are. We were just talking actually before the panel about California, and the business that we do in California is underpinned by the insurance market. And that we were just talking about, you know, what that insurance market looks like for us as mortgage providers, et cetera. So whether it's Lloyd's of London, whether it's the global insurance markets and all the shipping industry, so that underpinning of an insurance market goes without saying. I would add to that a couple of other things. We, on the financial service side, we're not an insurer, but one of the things that we can do as Bank of America is to crowd in. We have been doing that with colleagues since my visit to Kyiv, actually, to crowd in capital. And given the state of the economy, there's all different types of capital, riskier, blended, structured, and so having more specific insurance products can help with that. I also think that actually often the insurance market can be quite innovative, more than I'd appreciate. I don't want to speak for the industry, but I tend to find that their approach to risk, their approach to coming up with sector-specific first loss structures that allow specific insurance instruments to crowd it in, that allows capital flow in, allows for some interesting innovation to take place in an economy that is going through, what it's going through. So even though the absolute amount of premiums, I don't know, I read something about 2 billion in premiums written or something like that in Ukraine, I may be wrong, might have dropped by 20, 30%, is maybe rising slowly. I think for the next phase would need different types of war insurance, catastrophe insurance, other things that the insurers might be experts in to really catalyze that initial growth phase coming through. And if there is a period where there is a sort of post-destruction, then I think other normalized insurance products might come through. So it underpins what we do, whether it's in Ukraine or in California or in the UK. And I think that the industry actually can be quite innovative in helping us get going.
Okay, so I'm going to come on to some of those points with our other speakers, because you raised the question of war insurance, and that is hanging over our discussion here. Let me come to you next, Valdis Dombrovskis. You're Commissioner for the Economy in Brussels. You're representing the G7 here, if I'm right. in this conversation?
Well, I don't have any specific mandate from G7, but
you've
I'm
got
representing
an explicit
European Union,
mandate from Crispin, sitting in the front line. So, well, no, we're not going to hold you to the G7 bit. Just from your perspective, how can governments and the Commission begin looking at this question of how to unlock insurance?
Well, indeed, that's something what European Union attaches a lot of attention there and supports Ukraine actually to unlocking this insurance coverage. This is a critical element for boosting Ukraine's economy and also for attracting lots of private investment which Ukraine will need for recovery in the context of Russia's aggression. And what is happening now is that all international reinsurers companies have left Ukraine since the beginning of the war and imposed a blanket exclusion on all kinds of reinsurance policies. So there are only few private Ukrainian insurance and therefore limited offer of insurance products in Ukraine. So one thing is obviously for what is important and where we encourage the industry to take more nuanced look, because we understand war insurance and all this, but the insurers in Ukraine don't have access also for insurance of anything else like floods or earthquakes or construction insurance. Nothing. So one thing would be important to be more nuanced sectorally, but also geographically. Some 60% of local governments in Ukraine had not had a single explosives event since the beginning of the war. And then there are frontline local governments where there is a relentless war and intensity of destruction not seen since World War II. So also geographically it's very different, and also there one could have a more nuanced approach towards this insurance. So there we encourage indeed the insurance industry to take more like evidence-based and nuanced approach on what cannot be done in Ukraine. And then we're also looking how we can support it also from European Union's side, and already in June last year on the sides of Ukraine Reconstruction Conference in Berlin. We signed a memorandum of understanding, European Commission with European Bank of Reconstruction and Development and Government of Ukraine to establish this war insurance scheme, and right now we are finalizing the pilot phase for this and providing also financial allocation from this for this program from the European Union side. It's 50 million euros. Focusing in transport and practically being launched in the next months, and we'll continue working with EBRD how we can scale it up from this pilot phase. So it's also clear that something needs to be done on a public sector side, some additional support so that also the industry feels in a sense more confident to re-enter Ukrainian market.
Thank you for that, and for offering us that rather grim technical phrase, explosive events. We know what you mean. I want now to come to two practitioners in the market, John Doyle, who's CEO of Marsh McLennan, and Ivan Gonzalez, CEO of Corporate Solutions at Swiss Re. Because we've had an outline here of the need for insurance, and we've had these references in passing to war insurance. You've had your description, Commissioner, of how some areas are not touched, but others are absolutely flattened. And yet you didn't go on to say, but one could, very hard to predict at the time which is going to be which. And we are dealing also not just with the ongoing conflict, but this question, if the conflict stops, is Ukraine, as the President was saying yesterday, is it going to have a security guarantee enabling it to thrive, to bring back its people, to start rebuilding, one that it can rely on, but also one that your industry can rely on? Or could there be war again? How do you begin picking away at these questions and breaking them down so that your industry can get a grip on it? When you start, and then I come on to Ivan.
That was a nice light question to
Well,
begin.
we're beginning to get onto the how, but we are instantly into these technical questions of how.
Sure. So, let me just start by saying that Marsh McLennan is absolutely committed to the people of Ukraine, and it's a privilege to do the work that we do. We have a team of people based in Kyiv, a local business in Kyiv. I couldn't be more proud of the resilience of the Ukrainian people, but also our colleagues in Ukraine, in Kyiv as well. We're so committed. In fact, we took the very unusual step of partnering with our biggest competitor, and I'm not sure it's ever been done before, actually, in our industry, but Aon's an important competitor and an important voice in this conversation, and we're aligned on some of the things that needed to happen. What I would say is a lot of the conversation has been about reconstruction and investment that's going to be required, $500 billion, some estimates say, to rebuild the economy and the society in Ukraine. What I would say is that we didn't start there. We're trying to support the economy and enabling the economy to remain as resilient as it possibly can during wartime. And so we talked about the facility that we put together for shipping in the Black Sea, and that sent signals to the market and has allowed an important part of the local economy. Aon's put together a war risk facility as well. Important signals, to the marketplace. And we are a data-driven business, right? And that's underpins everything that happens. We're a risk advisor. Ivan represents a company that takes risk as an insurance company, but data underpins how we advise clients, and it certainly it informs how insurance companies take risk. We put together that war risk data platform. Oliver Wyman, our colleagues at Oliver Wyman, worked with the government, and that data is driving conversations about big parts of the country that have not been impacted, about asset classes that are not nearly at risk.
So can you just take us a bit into the detail about what, if anything, can be insured at the moment?
So some things are being insured.
What can't?
Some are being insured. But understandably, again, in a time of war, insurance companies and investors, it's, all capital has withdrawn, from the country. And so we're trying to build a foundation. We're sending signals to the market with the products that we've put together. But post-war, a lot more capital is going to need to be attracted to the market. Construction insurance hasn't been mentioned, but of course, that will be a critical component of it. And multinational insurers will want to come in, but they're going to want to know, they're going to want a healthy regulatory framework that can underpin risk-taking.
What does that mean?
Well, a framework that'll allow them to price risk as they see fit, that's reflective of the risk that they assume, that's got a good level of back and forth between the client and the insurer. So, and that's a conversation we've begun with the government as well. What could that regulatory regime look like? So it'll give the confidence of risk takers to bring capital into the marketplace. But capital will come if we can sort through some of those issues. I'm confident of that, and we've been building data sets that will enable some of that capital to come.
Okay, I might come back on some of those points because they're absolutely crucial. But Ivan, what do you think the insurance and the reinsurance industry will look for in terms of the conditions to be able to move in?
Well, first of all, let me join John and our panelists expressing my solidarity and my sympathy to all of you. I grew up in Colombia, in South America, in the 1980s, and I suffered what it is an armed conflict in your country, and car bombs exploding next to where you live. And I have a lot of respect for the way you have taken this very terrible situation. The company I work for is called Swiss Re, which is not the most creative way to say that we are from Switzerland and we do reinsurance. The company has been in business for 160 years. And during this time, we have unfortunately seen and done business in two global world wars, many regional, country, and provincial wars, but also faced terrorism. And when you talk about insurance, and you already heard why it's so important to enable economic development, it is important to understand that the basic of insurance is that it needs to be, first of all, quantifiable, and second of all, needs to be well understood. And if you think about Ukraine before 2022, it had a very vibrant insurance and reinsurance market that supported one of the most vibrant economies in Europe. Right after the events took place, as John said, capital flies away. What the insurance and reinsurance company did was first and foremost to apply what is called a war exclusion, which you already made reference to. The reason why that war exclusion exists is because it doesn't meet the criteria of doing business if you cannot quantify what exposures you're taking, and you cannot even have a parameter in terms of what are the losses that you will be assuming or will be paying. That being said, it's also been referenced that today insurance and reinsurance companies operate in Ukraine. Swiss Re provides capacity for the agriculture industry in Ukraine, which is of course very important. We talk about the shipment, cargo, as these products get exported out of the country. And we also provide insurance to enable the reconstruction of the country, particularly from an engineering perspective. That is, of course, not sufficient. It's not even close to where it was when this started. Therefore, we are very committed to find the ways to do this. I really congratulate, first of all, the government, of course, because you need the government at the table, but also Aon and Marsh in particular, for bringing this alliance of companies to think not only about how do we deal with the issue today, but more importantly, how do we deal with this issue as the country starts its reconstruction. So Swiss Re, and I talk also probably on behalf of other reinsurance companies as well and insurance companies, we are committed to the country. We are very interested in finding ways with the government and our business partners to be able to support the country going forward.
Okay, thank you. But I still want to push you, and you, John. What counts as the end of a war? Supposing fighting stops, supposing there's some kind of deal, but the war is not formally over, as happens in quite a few conflicts around the world. There is not a formal peace or anything. There is simply a cessation of fighting. How do you judge when it is acceptable to insure again?
I think it's hard to speculate, on what those terms might look like. There are very fully developed insurance markets in countries that have been in ceasefire for 50 years or 75 years and are still technically, at war. So it certainly, is possible, but there's going to be a range of factors, of course, that will underpin a level of confidence for investor interest, insurance capital to come back to the market. So, it's difficult, again, to speculate on exactly what maybe a ceasefire might look like, versus an end to the conflict. But, it's hard.
So, Minister, may I come back to you and just look at this? You've described the capital waiting to come into the country, and Ukraine obviously desperate to get the capital in, to get rebuilding, to get its people back, to get its businesses back, and so on. What is it you're looking for? How do you make this case to business? Or are we waiting for is all this waiting behind the diplomacy?
So I wouldn't say that we were waiting.
Diplomacy or events, I should say.
I wouldn't say that we were waiting. Maybe like in the middle of 2023, there was this like waiting period, and then the last whole year we just worked like nobody knows when this is going to end. We just do what we can, but then having in mind that we can scale these instruments that we create right now to work during the time of war, if the peace solution comes like next year or in the future, so we scale them up. So here, what we were discussing, for example, war risk insurance, if we have a peace deal, then probably the premiums will go down. Probably the existence of the instruments with really like small premiums will allow the boards to make easier decisions to deploy funds in Ukraine, right? Because the insurance exists and there are risks, etc. And we could cover like some of the facilities, first loss, etc. Then. Or we could change some of the instruments that work towards not the war risk insurance but political risk insurance. Yes, there are political risks in Ukraine that did exist. We're kind of developing democracy. We're going to be in EU, we think, faster than anyone anticipates. So we're going to comply with all of this and rule of law, and a lot of it we already do. But if the companies need to cover political risks, they need to have instrument that doesn't exist now. So we can use the same like war risk insurance instruments to cover political risks, right? But to have like government support, donor support underneath them. And then there is, in general, a Ukrainian market is like $1-2 billion in premiums underwritten a year. Like Poland is what, like 17, something like that. So, and the needs for reconstruction every year is like at least tens of billions, like 10-20 billion a year of like FDI coming into Ukraine. So basically, the level of the market development is not sufficient for the needs, and also I think the businesses that would like to come into country when there is a peace solution. It might cover the businesses who want to invest right now, and we just announced today the deal with Vestas, the Danish company, that also supported by Danish expert credit agency with this de-risking products. But I mean, like if there is a peace, we need to have this infrastructure in place. So we need to grow insurance market, and like it's chicken and egg, right? So if we're waiting and then the insurance market says, oh yeah, there's a lot of activity, we're going to lose like half a year of the actual investment in Ukraine.
This was the next thing I was going to ask you, is why to have this discussion now?
Yeah.
Because
so,
it takes time, because you want to be ready the minute.
Yes, that's one. The other one is like back to what the president said yesterday during speech. I don't know if you've heard. Like he was asking about Europe. Why does Europe care? Whatever like U.S. thinks, whatever Trump thinks, it should like be powerful enough to kind of do on its own. And we think that Ukraine could give Europe like the defense sector and then energy and critical minerals. We have all of this to make Europe stronger. So basically, we developed this in European context to realize this possibility, how we can make Europe stronger together with Ukraine. And we eventually gonna have like bigger insurance market and all these products. But yeah, why wait, right? And yeah, of course, there's possibility for peace, which will completely change the macro situation. For example, we understand that like hundreds of thousands of people gonna come like the first month. So look at Syria. So already in 2 months, they have 200,000 people coming back. So this completely flips, you know, like people are working for jobs, there's enough jobs, and there's like the whole economy is growing much rapidly.
Thank you. Bernie, I'm going to come to questions in just a moment. But Bernie, may I ask you one last one? And it's on this chicken and egg point. Are we having a conversation that's absolutely necessary right now to enable Ukraine to take advantage of the capital that is waiting? Or is it premature because so much remains uncertain and indeed unknown?
Absolutely critical. I mean, we've at Bank of America and others have been on this journey for a year and a bit. The Ukraine economy shrank in the first year of the war and then grew the year after that. And I believe last year grew a little bit as well. I love the enabling work is really important. We talked about the insurance industry, the legal environment. The government has a lot of, work that it can do to have an enabling environment, policies, making sure that the legal environment is working as efficiently as possible, travel insurance, working with foreign countries to allow their citizens to travel to Ukraine in the first place. There's a lot of business people that we speak to around the world who would like to visit, and they're happy to take the train, as we all have. And then helping the what I mean is, you know, you don't need to have air travel to Kyiv for them to help working with the government to figure out the sectors that it wants to prioritize. So in the last 8 months, I know my colleagues were very focused on the power sector, trying to crowd in those that could provide emergency and other power, and all of the work around that. So it'll be useful as Ukraine is coming out of the blocks, and as it's developing now. We know the agricultural sector. What do you think about the power sector? Which bits of the power sector? Is it renewable? Is it, how do they feel, where will they end up with their large nuclear facility at the end of the day? But all of a sudden, the dispersed ability of renewable power can be in the mix. So a huge amount of work that you wouldn't want to wait for the all clear to start, because then you're 2 years behind. And within that, it gives the opportunity for the real, frontier businessmen, and those that are not so frontier, but they're saying, I can work with some of the development finance agencies to de-risk some aspect of it. And actually, the Ukrainian government has de-risked some aspects of this risk as well to crowd people in. So it can't be more important. We should be optimistic about the future always in Ukraine.
Thank you. And Commissioner, I just want to come to you before, just last one before questions, because on this question of some of the development banks and indeed trying to take some of the risk out of this, what is the experience and the kind of tactics, I'm thinking of the EBRD and others, but say of trying to deal with corruption, which is a question in many countries during rebuilding, as a lot of money goes in. How do you try and take the risk out of that?
On this, I would particularly highlight our Ukraine facility, because from the EU side, we have also decided on a financial support of 50 billion euros till 2027 to help not only with immediate financing needs, but also to help with Ukraine reconstruction already. Obviously, since it's lots of public money flowing towards Ukraine, we took the question of protection of financial interests of the European Union and audit and control systems very seriously. So that's all, in a sense, integrated already in the framework of Ukraine facility, and also in other ways how we are providing financial support for Ukraine. So that's obviously an important point. And also, if you look at our macrofinancial assistance programs, macrofinancial assistance programs are not earmarked. They are there to basically to help Ukraine meet its kind of general financing needs. But they have certain ex-ante conditionality, and this ex-ante conditionality has also heavily focused on fight against corruption and, again, protection of the financial interests. So there's a lot of work ongoing on this, and it must be said that also over the years Ukraine has made lots of progress also in this anti-corruption area.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's come to questions. Well, I cough.
I don't normally need a microphone. I think one of the really interesting things that's come to the fore for the first time this week is something you touched on earlier, which is, if we're going to get a ceasefire, the Ukrainian fundamental position is around security guarantees. And it is the linkage between security guarantees and insurance, and indeed investment. And Yulia Sviridenko earlier this afternoon was saying, that businesses should be lobbying their governments to make sure the security guarantees are as strong as possible, because it will allow them then to move in. Be interested in comments.
Thank you. Let me, not just because of my cough, let me take them in two. Would you like to take a second question, though? Is it? Please make a second comment or question.
Here to help. And I want to thank both Ivan and John for talking about Aon and their role and an unprecedented removal of competition to get things going for the Ukraine. The short version of this question, because it spans the group, is I was here at the Ukraine House Monday night with you for the discussions, and it was unequivocal that Ukraine is open for business. These are not my words, these are from the Ukraine House team. The one thing about the dollars that we're talking about that go from reinsurance to brokerage to banks to governments, is the dollar spent on insurance has an economic impact far exceeding $1, but a dollar spent on business is a primary dollar. What the message of a lot of insurance people will watch this. What is your message to the business leaders and, dear sir, bankers who want to understand what these things do to let them have the primary investment that's empowered 10 to 1 by reinsurance, by brokerage, and by the government?
Great, thank you. Two great comments with questions embedded. Let's start at the end.
Yeah, I'm happy maybe to take both of them, but I'll start with the first one. So as I said, unfortunately, Swiss Re has a lot of experience dealing with what you do during a conflict and, more importantly, after the conflict. And in that context, one example I can think of is the situation in Korea, because you made reference to the security guarantees, and those security guarantees prevailed ultimately for the South Korean market in particular to very rapidly become a viable insurance market. I would assume that something similar would happen in this case, and not only Swiss Re, but other companies that had experience in this will be more than happy to sit down, first and foremost, with the government to start that transition and make sure that that capital can flow. To your point about the $1 in insurance and the exponential benefit that it brings, it is very clear, and I think that that's what I made the reference to. It cannot be the private sector alone, simply because of the nature of what you explained. We have also had experience with governments that have the ability to, as the conflict starts to get to the phase that we just discussed, to be able to have insurance companies start to commit and reinsurance companies to commit to those facilities that you're putting in place and be able to start that very fast exponential flow. But we need to get to that point first and foremost. In the current construct, we're limited to what I mentioned before, which was the fact that you have these exclusions for war. You have the ability to provide the coverage that we're providing today, and all else that you can do in terms of some narrow definitions will help, but it's just not enough, given the amount of money that we're talking about. So that's why the faster we can get to that phase, the faster the insurance industry can react.
I think
Thanks
Yvonne,
very much.
Yeah, I think Yvonne spoke to it, very well. I would also add that, in a time of ceasefire, not all risks are the same, right? So, construction risk is going to have a multi-year, duration to it, and so there'll have to be greater confidence around how the conflict comes to an end, as opposed to, again, using shipping as an example. That's got a much shorter duration to it. So, I would make that point. And that certainly connects to, to guarantees for sure. And then the levered effect, as you point out, Brian, is massive in insurance, and it's the magic of risk pooling, and it really underlies, economic, not just stability but growth all over the world. Yeah.
Is there a point? Would either of you like to come in on these points?
I wouldn't add too much. I mean, we recognize the important part that insurance plays in allowing us to play on top of that. No doubts about it.
No, fine. I think we covered a lot of it before.
Yeah, I wanted to come in on this point on security guarantees. That's obviously a much broader question, but clearly there is a link. The stronger are the security guarantees, the more confident can be both people and businesses in general about the reconstruction, and insurance industry in particular. So that's a very valid point, and that will be a very important point once this conflict and Russia's aggression moves to the end, because Russia is openly talking about invading other countries and then moving further in Ukraine, so they will feel halfway successful with this their Ukraine war. Certainly they will be moving on. And to stop it, it really requires very serious security guarantees. Question what it is, because, well, supposedly Ukraine had security guarantees. There was the Budapest Memorandum when Ukraine, gave up its nuclear weapons, and but then at the end of the day, it did not amount for so much that actually Russia was one of the guarantors, but also other guarantors, including United States, including European countries, actually did not provide the necessary level of support to stop that aggression. Yes, lots of support has been provided, but it did not amounted to security guarantees which were given. So the question is, another Budapest Memorandum probably would not do. So the real security guarantee, okay, that's not a kind of competence of European Union, but kind of privately speaking, it's Ukraine joining NATO, and that was a mistake that in 2008 it was not done because Russia as an aggressor is provoked by a weakness, and so we need to demonstrate strength.
Commissioner, and I know there's a question here. I just want to explore this point, though, because it is an absolutely essential one. You've said, look, Ukraine gave up the nuclear weapons that were on its soil. I don't think you're suggesting it should try and get new nuclear weapons by way of reducing the risks against it.
This I would leave to Ukraine, by the way.
No, but you're talking about the security guarantees that have been extended, and you're saying, okay, maybe NATO would be the security guarantee. But you've raised a really important question, which I've heard in other panels today and after the President's speech yesterday, which is, can Ukraine rely on any security guarantee? And what is the nature of a security guarantee that will allow, and this is really what we're talking about here, allow Ukraine to thrive again, free from the fear of Russia starting a war again. And Minister, it's irresistible to come back to you on this point.
That's fine.
This is essentially what we're talking all kinds of technical things. You can feel the appetite here for people to help Ukraine, for the insurance to come, for the capital to come. But there is this question of what really is a security guarantee that will, if there is such a thing, that will allow Ukraine to live again.
Yeah, so like how we discuss this right now is that it's actually in the hands of business to tell if the guarantees, like however they might look like. Okay, best is NATO, right? If NATO doesn't work out, then troops on the ground, like air defense, strong. So there is an example of Israel, right? So they have a thriving insurance market. They're constantly shelled, but kind of the economy operates, and everybody's fine with that. Why? Because everybody understands that they can protect themselves. Why? Because they're like very, very well armed. Ukraine right now can produce like 40% of what we, or like 60% of what we're fighting with right now. So basically, we can produce those arms. We just need to figure out how to structure it and how to do it long term. So the business actually believes, okay, this is feasible. This plus that, and then some like legal insurance gonna work for us. We're gonna believe that long term, like our investments will be more or less like not safe, and then the rest of the risk gonna be covered by insurance. If business says that this is a phony deal, there's gonna be no deal. Because like eventually, if we get this kind of deal that nobody believes in, like people are not stupid, and Ukrainians as well. And you, for example, like open the borders, everybody leaves, says like, yeah, they screwed us over. We've seen the Budapest Memorandum, so there's not going to be any deal. So but what I'm trying to say is that this condition, like the collective that estimates whether the guarantees are strong enough, is exactly in business hands. Because when there's going to be business coming, there's going to be investment, growth, and stronger Ukraine, which will enforce itself that country is going to protect themselves. So we're asking the business to be engaged through the governments, saying, okay, like the deal that you're discussing right now doesn't seem to work very well for us. So that would be a powerful signals that they're sending.
So I think a lot of people would agree with everything you've said, including the powerful signals. But you gave an essential, it seems to me, argument early in that answer of saying maybe we have to show that we can do a lot of our defense ourselves. Because can you really believe in security guarantees these days? And I'm not going to broaden this session out, but it is exactly the kind of question you're hearing in the discussions of South Korea, Japan, can they rely on guarantees and so on. For another day. Question here.
Okay, so first, just to Lennox Zarni, Horizon Capital, one of the co-organizers, and a few questions that have come in through our live stream, so I'll relay those. But in terms of this, I fully agree with what you said, First Deputy Minister, that it's going to be a bespoke solution. And what we heard during the first night is that, it is going to be a combination, and it's going to be a determined force. Nobody believes in a UN peacekeeping force. People believe in a determined force, in air superiority, in no limits on Ukraine's militarization, on air defense, and it's going to be a combination. That's what we have heard in the House throughout the week. Second thing I want to say is that thank you so much for the game-changing on unity. That was absolutely critical. Ukraine had a 200 billion nominal GDP economy that fell to 160. It's back up to 194. Big part is being able to ship those agriculture, commodities, metals, and that has trickled down throughout. The Xavier-Niel transaction, while Xavier did not have his equity guaranteed, the debt providers, thank you for the Ukraine Investment Facility, because EBRD and IFC were backstopped by the guarantees in the Ukraine Investment Facility, and the insurance that was done in 90 days to get the disbursement, which is incredible, which was unheard of back in 2022 or 2023. And the provocative question that has come in through the live stream is, are you working on the opening of the airports? The same game-changing as we've seen with the shipping. Folks there's a lot of talk about, is it Lviv that's opening? Is Borispol opening? Are you already secretly working on reopening that passenger air traffic and ensuring, providing the insurance that has to be provided?
Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, and that was a terrific point. Do we have a second question? It was a terrific point, followed by a really good question. Do we have a second question? Otherwise, the full force of that question about the airports is going to fall on several of you. Who would like? A lot of people's spines at stake. Yeah.
The answer is yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. On the airport. Any more on the airports?
We are working on, all the risk elements and trying to restore air traffic at least into the western part of the country and putting together insurance capital. It'll require.
And going back to our earlier point, what does that depend on? In terms of the bigger diplomacy, politics, and so on?
Insurer confidence will be underpinned by data, and we have that war risk data platform that will support some risk taking. But again, given wartime, it'll require an innovative solution, much like Unity and the war risk platforms that have been put together to date. So it'll be a public-private partnership, and we're pressing every day to try to make that happen.
Yeah, I would add one is that how intricably insurance and defense are interlinked, right? So Unity facility, we don't need that much anymore, not just because the markets are working, but because Ukrainian drones chased away Russian Navy up to, Novorossiysk, yeah. So, the drones are providing this insurance because the ships can't really attack the cargo ships that come from Ukraine. So here in the airport is the same. So whether it has enough air defense for it to be enough secure to then insurance top that, that's kind of a combination of all different factors.
Okay, let me take, there's one here, and we could squeeze in one more. We're going to go a few minutes over the top of the hour.
Dan Bilek from Kyiv, Ukraine, whose spine can barely take any more international travel from the trains. And so isn't the insurance issue around airports, say out of Lviv, a discussion with Turkish Airlines, Qatar Airlines, India Airlines, those carriers that we know aren't going to get shot down? There's a risk profile for you.
All right. There's a comment here. I think and this is in the nature of a discussion.
I'm nervous commenting on this because I got into trouble with the OPU doing a television interview on Lviv Airport the other day. But no, I think the airlines are ready. The regulators are ready pending air defense. And it is that sort of military risk, which has been made more difficult by the Russians shooting down that Azerbaijani aircraft. But Lviv Airport is out of range to Russian air defense missiles. So Lviv is actually quite possible, and hopefully in a few months we may have some good news.
All right, a few months. That's great. Any last comments, points, and that includes panelists, to anyone wanting to respond to something that they heard before. Please.
Yeah, maybe one overarching comment, which is that you need to have the confidence that when the conditions for insurance to be there are met, insurance will be there. All the work that is being done by Aon and Marsh, but with all their partners behind the scenes, are for us to be ready when we have to be ready. There's not going to be a situation that the airports can be open and you don't have insurance. That's just the message that I wanted to convey. And as John said, it's not just about the airports, it's about the economy as a whole.
Okay, I think, is there anything else? We will then leave it there. We obviously have hanging over all of this the question of the bigger conditions that bring all this conversation into action, would not ignite it or would allow this capital to start flowing forth, and that is what kind of resolution of the conflict there is on terms that are sufficient for Ukraine to be able to live securely and so thrive again and bring people back and businesses back and so on. And that is why the president is here. And the nature, he's not out there, yeah. And the nature of many other conversations on Ukraine at Davos. But we're going to draw this one to a close now. Thank you very much for coming, indeed. Thank you to my panelists.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I would like to thank, on behalf of Ukraine House, to Marsh McLennan for this great partnership on this panel. So we do appreciate that for the second year you support this important topic, and hopefully, we'll do some progress together. And again, I sincerely apologize for the delay, but I do appreciate that you stayed for this discussion. Thank you very much, and we have some presents from Ukraine to keep you warm, in Davos. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Oleksiy.
It's called Coals to Newcastle. Yeah.
Pens and bracelets.
All right, I take one. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all very much indeed for coming.
That's good. I think, can we have the photo of the panelists, please, together? Thank you.